Welcome everybody to Mom Street USA. My name is Jackie, aka Wishes Mama, and joining me is my wonderful, lovely co-host Kate, aka the Disney Cicerone. And today on our podcast, we are launching a brand new series, probably at least 4 parts. I think we've kind of hopefully nailed it down to that, all about the Disney Cruise Line. So we're going to be giving you as much information as we can possibly gather about this kind of separate aspect of Disney from the parks. But we're excited to kind of launch in. Kate, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good. I'm very excited to launch into this topic. Disney Cruise Line is one of my favorite things about Disney, and I think it's a thing that it really is so very different than the Disney parks. We've talked about this offline, but it's nothing like the Disney parks in a lot of ways, but it is just as magical, even if not more so sometimes than the Disney parks in a lot of ways. So we're here to really help you guys figure out if you're thinking about a cruise, if you don't know anything about it, even if you are kind of a veteran cruiser, maybe there will be some tips and tricks that you can incorporate here as we go into the series to make it interesting for y'all. But I'm very excited. I have been on a couple of Disney cruises myself. I've been on an Alaska cruise, a 7-day Alaska cruise. I've done a very short one that was paired with a Disney World trip to the Caribbean. And then I've been to one that was in the Northern European cruise. So I've been kind of like multiple ports, multiple areas around the world. So I feel like at least from those 3, I've had somewhat of an experience with Disney Cruise Line. But of course, I haven't been on all the ships and whatnot. So We're definitely going to lean into our Mom Street community for those of you who have cruised a lot for those kinds of information.
Yeah, for sure. And you just booked another cruise with a friend coming up, didn't you?
I did. I have one coming up next year. I'm going to do a writing retreat with a friend of mine. So we purposely booked one with a lot of at-sea days so we could just spend the whole time reading when we're not eating, because that's what you do.
Reading, writing, and eating. That sounds like Kate's perfect vacation.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that. And she was a veteran cruiser too, so I've been asking for her advice. She'll give us hopefully some in the series as well, because she booked us this amazing spot on the ship, and I can't give it away because I don't want to give away where my room is at, but I'm very excited for her expertise in that. So
that's awesome. Well, today I think we're going to start with the basics of booking as kind of the goal for this episode. We don't want to overwhelm you. We don't want to throw all of the information at you at once, which is why we are breaking this down into several parts. But for today, let's start with kind of the where and the when and the how is the goal for now.
Yeah. Basically, how do you get started with a Disney cruise vacation? Where do you start? Where do you begin? How do you book your trip? And I feel like everything always kind of just starts with, well, where do you want to go? And when and how long and those kinds of things. And I feel like that's what we all do. I don't know if you do this, Jackie, but if you've ever dreamed about going on a cruise and you just kind of well, you do it for the parks too. You kind of just browse the website and you're like, ooh, that would be fun. And you create this imaginary vacation.
Oh, for sure. And I even did that in my research this week because I was looking up, I did a lot of the where you can go and what options they have. And you'll find Kate has more intel for the where on the ship to book, so we kind of can bounce back and forth a little. But there were so many places that I was like, oh, that would be awesome. Oh, that would be amazing. But I'll be honest, I'm not completely sold on the idea of a cruise. I don't know how I've never been on one. I don't know how I would do. I'm not sure about it, but
I think if we took you on one, Jackie, you would be hooked for life.
And I was gonna say maybe I will convince myself throughout this whole series that we have going here. And I will say, if I do ever do a cruise, it's going to be a Disney cruise. Is there even any question about that for me and my family? So we'll see what happens. But should we jump into kind of where to go?
Yes. So this is an interesting one because the itineraries for Disney Cruise Line do somewhat change year per year. So, whether or not they go to Hawaii, they went to Australia this year, and, all the different places that are kind of more far reaching, sorry, something fell. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, all the places that are not like the basics where they already have ports, like anywhere that's in like the Caribbean and the Bahamas, like those are going to be a given. They have ships that just kind of live there. Usually they always go to Alaska and they have a season there. And typically they have a season in the Mediterranean or European countries. But what ports they go to, that really depends on a lot of things. If they can get a port, they can book a port there is one of the things. And their itineraries just do change from time to time to mix it up. They also have some specialty cruises and things like that, which we'll get into. But generally speaking, they do release it about a year in advance is when you can start to book these things. And we'll talk a little bit more about the booking process in a bit. But do you want to talk about some of the places they are going or have gone?
Yes. So this is current as of the last 2 weeks here. We are in case you're listening to this in the future, this is April 2024. As far as what the website says, they have a ton of different options. I'm not going to give you every single itty bitty detail. I'm just going to give you
forever.
No, exactly. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of each location that they've got featured on their website right now. I will mention the Disney Cruise Line website is very easy to navigate overall. I find it easier to navigate than even the Disney World website, but there's also less bits and pieces that you kind of have to pick and choose between, because a lot of it, once you pick which cruise line or which cruise you're going on, a lot of that kind of gets decided for you. But
they have a fun app too, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to play around with that before next week to see what I can figure out on there.
There's not much on it until you actually get on the ship, and then it turns into the Navigator app. But it has a countdown and stuff on it for your family, and it's
so
fun.
Yeah. Love that. That's awesome. Okay, so where to go? Let's talk about where to go. One option that they have for the Disney Cruise Line is Alaska. Kate mentioned this one already on our episode. They have anywhere from a 5-night to a 9-night option, and kind of different ones in between that you'll typically see the odd numbers. So 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13 if you're going that long. So those are kind of typical for what you see. It departs from Vancouver, and it visits a bunch of places that I'm going to attempt to pronounce. So
I can do it if you want.
Okay, you got it. It's you.
It visits Ketchikan, Skagway, Juneau. They have glacier viewing in the, that one I know, Stikine Ice Cap. Stikine, I think is what it is. Sitka and Victoria, Canada. So kind of does the loop.
It wasn't too bad.
Yeah, and it is really a lovely, lovely one. You definitely want to have either a porthole or a balcony, like a veranda for this one, because especially when you go up that glacier viewing area, it goes through this beautiful fjord with this really gorgeous colored water, and then you can watch all the little ice float around you and whatnot. So it's so much more fun to sit, especially because it's chilly. Yeah, there. It's fun to be able to have your room, so you can kind of also retreat back into your room and warm up as you need to. I think that's a must for that particular itinerary.
Yeah, that's good to know. And you'll find that if we've got information about them, we'll kind of stick it in. We haven't been on all of these. We don't know people who have been to all of these, so we will do our best.
I had been on all of these.
Someday, start making a list, Kate. All right, so that is your Alaska option. Let's talk about the Bahamas option. Let's go from cold to warm here. So in the Bahamas area, they have anywhere from a 3-night to a 7-night option. It will depart from either Fort Lauderdale or from Port Canaveral, depending on your dates and ship and things like that. They will typically visit Castaway Key, which is Disney's private island, which we will talk more about in the future, I'm sure. And Nassau in the Bahamas. The longer ones also will visit Puerto Rico on that route as well.
Yes. In the same area, also, then we have the Caribbean, or Caribbean, depending on how you want to say it. I feel like there's people debate that all the time.
I know. Let's not get into that debate.
No. So there's 4 to 10 night options depending on ship and all those kinds of things and itinerary. It departs from Fort Lauderdale, Port Canaveral, and Galveston, Texas. So there's another option there of where it goes to. It does visit Disney's private island, Castaway Key, Virgin Islands, Jamaica, Cozumel, Mexico, also Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Barbados, and St. Lucia on some. So depends on your itinerary where you're going to go, but generally that area of the world. Really fun. And usually there's like, depending if you're on a longer itinerary, I'll just throw this out here. Usually there's 1 or 2 or more days at sea, which means you don't get off the boat those days. And you're never required to go to any of these places. So keep that in mind. If you're like, not really that interested, but I feel like I should, like, you're paying an awful lot for your Disney cruise. So do what you want to do. Don't feel obligated to go ashore and do anything if you don't. Right. We actually wished that we hadn't gotten off at Nassau, Bahamas, and we just stayed on the boat because we didn't actually enjoy it that much. That was maybe because we didn't choose like an extravagant port adventure or anything, but honestly, like we really just wished we had such a short cruise. We did one of the 3-day ones and we're like, we really would rather have been on the ship for that day. So don't ever feel obligated to go if it's not a place you want to go.
There you go. Or pick and choose if you're fortunate enough to be on a cruise that has multiple stops that you make. Pick and choose which ones you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of the times the Caribbean ones I've seen, they'll split into like east and west or things like that. So it really just depends on which route you take and where you leave from and all of that for what kind of combination of those locations that we mentioned that you will visit for yours.
Yeah, and you will see that the bigger ships tend to be in these particular ports in this area of the world. Disney has different classes of ships, which we'll also get into later. But you'll see the bigger ships tend to be here because in the Mediterranean, in Alaska and whatnot, they just have like places where they have to have smaller ships to maneuver. So if you really want to go on the bigger ships, the newer ships, they tend to be in this area of the world.
A lot more sea for them to
to
work around with. Yeah,
it's exactly. Deeper, all those things. Yes.
Right. All very important when it comes to that cruise line. I do have a good question from Ryan here in my chat. He is wondering if you get off at a port and decide it's not for you, can you get back on the ship right away?
Yeah. Yes, you can. We'll get into more of exactly the procedure of leaving and getting back on the ship. But yes, you can absolutely do that. I actually did that for my European trip. I tried to get off in Norway and they had a massive backlog of the transportation to town. The like transport buses that were running us from the ship's port to town, they were like not running like they were supposed to. I mean, I stood in the downstairs trying to get off the ship for at least a half hour in like a claustrophobic space. And then when I got out, the line went the entire length of the ship. And I just was so tired by that point. I was like, I'm just going to go get back on the ship. And like any kids that want to come with me, fine. Like we'll see Norway from like, we went mini golfing with no people around from Goofy's mini golf on the 14th deck. And I saw Norway and it was great.
Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. So you never have to get off the ship. And if you did get off the ship and you're like, I don't really want to do this. Just make sure that when you get off the ship, you have all of the things you need to get back on it, which is your key to the world card and your passport, potentially, depending on where you're going, what port it is. But you should have your ID anyway, whenever you're traveling anyway. So, but yes, the answer is yes, you can get back on it.
Perfect. So let's talk about the European options since you were just mentioning your European cruise. Perfect little segue there. So in Europe, they have anywhere from a 3-night to 12-night option. They all depart from Southampton, England, and there's kind of a hodgepodge mixture of where these ones go. They do typically visit England, Sweden, Finland, Russia, and the Netherlands for a lot of them, but then you also have the Norwegian fjords and a Mediterranean option there.
I did see Norway in a different stop. So this is my second stop in Norway, if anybody's concerned. So I did see Norway.
Yeah, so the Norway ones do have, if you're specifically looking for just kind of that Norwegian fjord, 8-night or 12-night options, and they visit Norway, England, and Iceland. And then the Mediterranean options do more of the Italy, France, Greece, Spain, and they depart from Barcelona or Rome. So lots of options if you're like Kate and you're going to be over there because you're kind of piggybacking trips in Europe, or if you're just planning to go over there just to do the cruise, you have a ton of options, which is really kind of nice.
Yeah, we chose the Southampton, England one as well so that we could take the Channel and go to Paris and then go to Disneyland Paris, which it was a lot of logistics traveling with our whole family and all our baggage to do that. So I'm not saying it's like an easy route to take, but that is something that is possible if you're there. We were originally going to do the Mediterranean one, and then I'm like, it was way too far to get to Paris with all of us and from there. So I was like, we chose Southampton instead. But I would say that the Norwegian one was amazing. We saw the oldest Viking ship in the world, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
It's definitely Frozen vibes for sure.
That's awesome. Well, and now for something completely different. Let's talk about Hawaii.
Before we go there, sorry, I have a question.
No,
How do I find out information about an Alaskan cruise? So that's a question that we have over here. The best way is honestly the Disney Cruise Line website has a lot of information about their specific itineraries and all their different ports that they go to. So you just search for Disney Cruise Line Alaskan Cruise. It should take you right to it. But that is my best recommendation for finding out more information about it.
Yeah, at least give you a good place to start, because once you figure out where you want to go and how many days, there's lots more information that they'll give you that we just can't, because it's too hard, because there's too many little pieces for each itinerary.
Yeah.
And then we always recommend booking with a travel agent once you're ready to book, because they will be able to help you with the ins and outs and details that maybe you didn't know about.
Yeah, especially if you've never cruised before.
Yeah,
that can really be helpful.
Yeah, and that goes for any. No, you're good. I say that goes for any location, not just Alaska. Feel free to start at that Disney Cruise Line website.
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready now to hop over?
Let's go to Hawaii.
Where it's warm and tropical again. It's funny, this list kind of goes back and forth unintentionally. So in the Hawaii location, they do have a 9 or 10 night option. So it is a longer cruise, just because it takes longer for you to get there, depending on where you're coming from. And this one was really interesting because it really just not that there's not a lot of options, but you either go from Honolulu to Vancouver, or you go from Vancouver to Honolulu. So like it's one or the other, depending on which direction you travel, depends on if it's a 9 night or a 10 night. So not as many options when it comes to this location, just because of that travel. And there are lots of days at sea when it comes to that, because you do have quite a bit of ground to cover to kind of get you to the islands if you're coming from Vancouver. But you do visit all 4 Hawaiian islands and Vancouver on that one.
Yeah. And they have switched up that itinerary in the past, where it will just go around the islands and visit all the different islands and not travel from somewhere else. So that one is, and sometimes they don't even have it at all. That one's it's one that's like you have to kind of just catch it when it's there, because it's not always there. And also I recommend booking that one as early as possible, because that one I have seen it sell out before. So because it's really popular.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Next up, we have Mexico. There is 3, 4, and 7 night options for Mexico. Departs from San Diego. So if you're in the California or the West Coast, this might be a good option for going on a Disney cruise. Typically visits Ensenada, Catalina Island in California, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and Cabo San Lucas. So a couple different stops there in Mexico. And then we get to some ones. I'm going to bounce down one, Jackie, just real quick. I'm going to hit the Pacific Coast one, since we're already kind of on the Pacific Coast and we're talking about it.
Perfect.
This one's a 4 and 5 night option, sails between San Diego and Vancouver, and also visits Victoria, British Columbia. And I will say the coastline is absolutely beautiful of the Pacific Coast. However, it is chillier, and the sea can be a little bit rougher, because the Pacific Ocean is a little bit rougher than some of the other places. So keep that in mind if you have a lot of motion sensitivity, or if you don't like the cold. That might not be a great option for you. But I do love the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, and that's another one that kind of just goes between either you go from San Diego to Vancouver or Vancouver to San Diego. So kind of like we mentioned with that Hawaii option as well. It just kind of does that circle in probably just cyclically. It's like the people that are on those boats are probably like, oh, okay,
like, and here's Vancouver.
Where else now?
San Diego. Vancouver's gorgeous too. Yeah, surrounded by mountains. Really lovely there. Do you want to talk about New Zealand and Australia?
Yeah, so this is a newer one, I believe, that they have just started offering, or maybe reoffering after the world changed a couple of years ago. But they do have a New Zealand and Australia option. They have a 2 night to a 7 night option here, and it departs from either Melbourne, Auckland, or Sydney. And then also visits Brisbane, Hobart, and Eden as well.
As soon as I saw this, I was like, Well, we were supposed to get the Sydney Opera House in Epcot. Like Australia was supposed to be one of the countries of Epcot, and we never got it. So I was like, maybe this is their subtle way of giving us Australia.
I don't know that crossed their mind when they planned this, but we can pretend. Too funny. So that is kind of the rundown of the different locations. Again, these are subject to change based on when you're looking and what year and what time of year and all that type of thing. But those are the locations that they have currently offered on the Disney Cruise Line website.
And we do have some specialty cruises as well. Some of these are repositioning cruises. So what that is for Disney Cruise Line talk is that they're trying to get a ship from one location where it's kind of been living to another location where it's going to live. And in that, they're like, well, let's put some people on board and, make some money
while we reposition our boat.
The boat. But it also is really fun because you have way more at-sea days. So if you're somebody who's like not typically interested in shore excursions, if you don't really want to leave the boat, you want to just kind of be immersed in the Disney Cruise Line atmosphere 24/7, because who doesn't? This is like perfect for you because there's a ton of at-sea days. One of those is the transatlantic cruises, which is a dream of mine. Someday I'm going to go on it. I wanted, because Walt did it. I just want to go transatlantic. Not like the Titanic, but more like Walt. There is a 13-night transatlantic cruise that sails from Fort Lauderdale to Barcelona and typically visits Spain and Portugal. Sometimes you'll see also a stop in Castaway Key before they head over. That's pretty typical for that. Another really fun one that's also on my list is the Panama Canal cruise. And that one's usually with the smaller ships. So that's usually the Wonder usually does that when it's going to Alaska. But I haven't seen it offered in a little while. So I don't know. Maybe they just permanently station the Wonder over there. And they're like, you're just living on the West Coast.
That could be because, the fleet has grown recently. So maybe they were able to shift things around and they just don't take that route anymore.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen the Dream has been over in Europe a lot, and the Wonder's been on the West Coast. I feel like the Magic, I'm trying to see where the Magic was. I feel like the Magic is sometimes in Europe, but I'd have to look it up. But then the really big ones, the new ones, are all just kind of down in the Florida, Caribbean, Bahamas area. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's probably their biggest seller, I would think, is probably those.
Yeah, so for sure.
Yeah. Another option that they have for these specialty cruises is, is this still under the transatlantic? Wait, hold on.
No.
Repositioning cruises.
Repositioning cruises.
Sorry, I read that wrong. Is they will do that between Hawaii and Australia sometimes. So you can have a South Pacific one, which is a 15-night option that sails between Honolulu and Sydney. And will typically visit Samoa, the International Dateline, Fiji, and New Caledonia as well.
Yeah, I don't think that they have done Australia very much. I have only seen it recently, so I feel like that's somewhat new of an itinerary for them. Somebody can correct me though, because I don't know where they've gone way in the past. So
right. And that was the vibe I got too with that whole Australia, New Zealand area, that it's a recently acquired area that they have been able to offer cruises for.
Yeah. And for me that's appealing though, to do that one that goes from Hawaii to Australia, because Hawaii is a 6-hour flight from us. And I was and then I could, because it's such a long flight to get to Australia.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have to do it both ways, maybe I could take a cruise one way and just have to fly home.
Right.
That makes it appealing.
Yeah. That's exactly what Stevie just said in the chat over here. She said that sounds ideal to go from North America to Australia rather than having to fly.
Yeah.
It'd be a much better.
But if we could cruise back too, that would be great.
Can I book a round trip cruise? How does that work? Round trip flight, round trip cruise. It has to work the same, right?
That one would be spendy. It's 15 nights. 15 nights is a lot of money. Not gonna lie. So
yes, I can.
When I win the lottery, I'll do my round trip cruise to Australia. Oh goodness. Okay, so there's other things that they have. This is actually one that we've done before. This was my very first cruise. We did a Disney Vacations Land and Sea package. which is a combination travel package with Walt Disney World and then cruises departing from Port Canaveral, which if you don't know anything about the history of Disney Cruise Line, I won't get into it here because we'd be here all night. But we did do a Distory with Kate and Kirk episode on the history of the Disney Cruise Line, which is fascinating. So if you just want to like learn about that, that's where you can go for that. But the reason Disney Cruise Line started was because they recognized a lot of people were, leaving Disney World and then going on a cruise on other cruise lines down in Port Canaveral area. And they're like, well, we should be getting a piece of that pie because they're coming here for us, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they started doing things with like the Big Red Boat and whatnot. They started doing partnerships with them, but their standards just really weren't up to Disney standards. Their rooms were too small for families. They really just weren't. The food wasn't that great. And so they're like, why don't, this was Michael Eisner. I'm going to give him credit for that.
Don't
his
tell
idea,
Kirk.
like I know that we should have, our own cruise line. And then we can do this thing where people will go to the parks and then they can go on a cruise or vice versa, either way. But I would go parks first and then relax on the cruise personally. It would be hard to go the other way.
Yeah.
But that's where this idea of this land and sea comes from, is very much the birth of the Disney Cruise Line. This is how it came about. So.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that there's not a land and sea option on the West Coast.
No, that is really interesting. Maybe just I would say like because San Diego's not close enough, but it's really not that far.
Right, and
Port
like
Canaveral.
I was going to say Port Canaveral to Orlando is probably only a little bit closer. So I just thought that was interesting. I don't know, maybe they just, because we talked about, it's Hawaii or it's Vancouver or it's maybe they just don't they don't have as many itineraries running out on that side of the country. So it's not as
And I think people don't plan as many trips to Disneyland. It's so many locals. I think that's part of it too. So Disney World, you're apt to like travel to Florida and have a giant family vacation versus Disneyland. There are people obviously who travel to Disneyland for vacation, but not nearly as many. And I wonder if that's part of it.
Probably just wasn't worth them putting the effort into planning it when they knew there weren't going to be as many people booking it.
Yeah. Yeah. That would make sense.
Yeah. I do have a question over here that I think you'll be able to help answer, Kate. Single dad over here is saying, so do you get a discount booking Walt Disney World and a Disney cruise together, or is it two totally separate bookings?
I have not booked it in like 13 years, so I'm not sure. I feel like they weren't discounted. They were just coupled together, and it did include, I think, transportation.
That's what I was going to say. I think they include transportation.
That was the benefit of booking them together, was that you would get transportation on the Disney Cruise Line bus, which is really fun for kids too, because they have little portholes on them and stuff. But down to Port Canaveral, wherever you're going from. So I feel like that was the only benefit of them. We also booked ours super late, so it's hard for me to say. I need to look it up. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I would be surprised if there was any major discount booking them together. Unfortunately, I think it's just more ease of, transportation, and because that helps your luggage get there, that takes care of your, before you go on the cruise line, it takes care of your lodging that you need and all that kind of stuff. It's more convenience rather than price, probably.
Yeah. Kind of like when you book a Disney vacation, like the vacation package at Disney World, it's like sometimes it kind of is a little bit cheaper. Like they'll throw in some freebies, like you get like mini golf and things like that, but it's not like so much cheaper when you book a package necessarily, depending. So yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about one of the other options that they have for specialty cruises, and that is a wedding cruise. That is
a wedding cruise.
I know, right? That is something that they offer, and they have like full package deals for the weddings that includes, I'm just going to kind of run down this list, an on-site ceremony coordinator for the day's events, which is super helpful. A choice of fresh floral for the ceremony couple, a solo pianist to perform at the ceremony, an officiant to conduct the ceremony, a wedding cake and champagne toast celebration, dinner for two at Paolo during your cruise, a commemorative Disney Cruise Line ceremony certificate, steaming services for the couple's ceremony attire.
Which, if you've ever tried to iron something on the cruises, you know that that's really valuable.
Yeah, yeah. And then they also give you $100 stateroom credit for merchandise, spa treatments, port adventures, or other onboard activities. So that is all included in your package deal if you book a wedding cruise through the Disney Cruise Lines.
Yeah, I will say that they don't have ironing boards in your room on Disney cruises. And so and of course you want to steam your fancy stuff, but there was always lines of people in the laundry room waiting to iron their clothes on formal nights.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So just be aware that that's an important thing. I did look into though, because I was looking at vow renewals for me and my husband, we're 18 years now, which is crazy.
That's awesome.
And I was like, but the Disney parks ones were so much spendier than Disney cruise one. I was like, we should do a Disney cruise one because we can also go on a cruise.
Right? That's amazing. That would be so fun.
So they do have options for vow renewals as well as weddings.
There you go. Along with the wedding options, they do also have a honeymoon option, but I will be honest, it's noted on the website, but there's no specific honeymoon packages that they have listed. So everything I read to you for the wedding one was all straight up listed, copied and pasted from their website. They also mentioned they do honeymoon cruises, but that's all that they say. It's just, we do honeymoon cruises. And that's it. So not sure exactly what perks come with that, if any, or if they're just suggesting that maybe you take your honeymoon on a Disney cruise. I'm not really sure.
They probably do a few things if you, like they do in the parks where they give you happy anniversary desserts and things like that. They probably would make your trip special in those little touches is my guess.
That would also be my guess because Disney's just as good at that. But it was it was funny to me that they advertised it and then there was literally no information on it when it came to actually looking at what it offered. I was like, I got nothing. Cool.
Just crazy. Yeah. The other thing that they have is also Adventures by Disney packages. So they've got Adventures by Disney Cruise Escapes, which include Europe. So that's Barcelona, London, and Rome. I'm guessing different itineraries for those.
Yes.
Yeah. In North America, they've got Disneyland in California, which is so they can couple it with a cruise. Is that what you found out?
Yeah. So they can do Disneyland and then a Californian coast cruise of some sort. So
maybe
that's kind
the
of similar,
package.
right?
So San Diego, we were talking about, is kind of
but you have to do it through Adventures by Disney and not through the Disney Cruise Line.
Got it. Okay. And then they also have one for Australia that's Sydney Escape as well. So if you just kind of Adventures by Disney is good for if you really just want to kind of do hands off and you want Disney to kind of handle all the things and tell you where to show up and where to go, and they're gonna handle a lot of the logistics of all the things. But it does come at a price. So I will say that.
Yes. And again, those options are through Adventures by Disney. They are not directly through the cruise line from what I gathered. But your best bet is always going to be to ask a travel agent that knows way more than we do about all of that.
All right. So those are kind of all the packages that are available, the different itineraries. And we didn't mention it, but I will just throw it out there that some of the itineraries also will be special throughout the years. Sometimes they'll have a Pixar one or a Marvel day at sea, or they'll have, they'll have the Christmas ones or the Halloween ones, they'll have ones for holidays. They'll have ones for different characters. So just be aware of those as you're booking. Sometimes they'll have them listed as this is a special one because typically they'll have a day at sea that's kind of themed, and usually it's pirates. They used to have a Frozen one for some itineraries, but then they took it away. And so the Norwegian one, but the ones, I'm still bitter about it. So.
I know. For those of you that don't know, Kate was anticipating a particular theme and may have planned some outfits around a particular theme, and then did not get that particular theme.
They just ended it the cruise before ours, which is so silly.
I know.
But anyway, it's fine. It's all fine. But anyway, like the Marvel Day at Sea and stuff, you'll see like a lot of those characters. It's a themed like that. You can do dress up in costumes, and it's all really fun. And they have particular shows for those things. And sometimes on some ships they have fireworks, depending on your itinerary and your ship and all those kinds of things, which is really, really neat. So those are also some special cruises you can choose to go on as well. Okay. All that being said, should we talk about when to go?
Yes. So as I was looking up the different options currently on the website, currently dates are up through about September of 2025. So we're looking a little bit, year and a half or so that are out there. And really when to go ultimately really depends on where and which locations you're looking to go to. Because you'll see the more you dig into that website, the more you'll see that they don't offer every itinerary every week. They just can't. So the thing about booking Disney cruise is you kind of really have to be flexible based on where you want to go. Certain ones will run certain weeks and things like that. So just keep that in mind. It may be difficult if you come into it looking for a specific week that you want to go. It may be really difficult to kind of make that work. It may be easier to, again, look way in advance, like Kate suggested earlier in this episode, and then base your decision on where you want to go.
Yeah, and some things to keep in mind is that typically when kids are out of school, those cruises tend to go way up in price, especially during the summer. Summertime cruises are really expensive compared to the off-season. So if you have a way to go in the off-season, you'll definitely save some money that way. But the downside to that is some places, especially, in Alaska or Europe or whatnot, they have tourist seasons as well. And some of the places are kind of like closed or short hours in the off-season. So just to keep that in mind. And also hurricane season. If you're going anywhere in the Atlantic area, hurricane season is a thing. And sometimes those cruise ships will get rerouted and not make certain ports just to keep you safe.
Right.
So be aware of hurricane season could potentially derail what you had planned, and just be willing to be flexible if you're going during hurricane season to one of those locations.
Yes, that is a very good point that Liv also just mentioned over here in the chat. She's like, don't forget about hurricane season. So thank you, Liv. We appreciate that.
Not something you have to worry about on the Pacific Coast as much, although Pacific Coast does have storms that blow through, but they're not hurricane storms. They're just windstorms. So hurricane is a windstorm, but you know what I mean. It's like not a hurricane force windstorm.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
We gotcha. We knew what you meant. Shall we talk just briefly about the different ship options that you have in Disney Cruise Lines? Yes.
And so the different ships, there's 6 different ones currently. They're still building 2 right now, so they're on their way. But they're divided into different classes of ships. And this is basically like they made them kind of around the same time and released them around the same era, like, the same set of 3 years or 4 years or whatever. So the first ones that they had was the Magic class, which are 84,000 tons. So these are the smallest ships. They have the Disney Magic and the Disney Wonder. I have a really cool little graphic too of showing you kind of like what they look like.
Ooh.
So you can see down at the bottom, the Disney Magic and the Disney Wonder are the smallest ones by far. And then they just get bigger as they get newer. So the Dream class is about 130,000 tons. So it's significantly larger than the first 2. And this has the Disney Dream and the Disney Fantasy. Then the Triton class is the newest ones that are just coming out now. So the Disney Wish, which is currently sailing. The Disney Treasure, I think, is sailing soonish. I haven't looked at the date for that. And then the Disney Destiny, they just announced the name of it. So it's not going to be sailing for a little bit. But that is 144,000 tons. So even bigger than the Dream and the Fantasy. So very, very large ships, those ones.
Yeah.
Which, you can, there's both upsides and downsides to them. Those smaller ships, they have less people. They have less people trying to use the elevators. They have less congestion in general for all the places, but they also are older and their rooms are a little bit smaller. So you just have to kind of which way you're going to go. So it's like, they also have fewer cabins. So there's those itineraries might sell out sooner versus the ones on the bigger ships and whatnot. So just all things to take into account. There's also, on the Magic and Wonder, there's a lot less walking because it's just a smaller vessel. You do a lot of walking on these ships. They are huge.
Yeah.
So you get your steps in, think like Epcot size. That's what you're doing, but all over the ship. So anyway, the newer the ship, the larger it is, and that's kind of how the ships are organized. And we'll get into more details about the ships.
And what they offer and what's on each ship and all that good stuff. Yes, we will get into that. We just wanted to get you familiar with the names as we go forward for the rest of this series.
Yes. So knowing that those are the ships, should we talk about how much our Disney cruise is?
Yes, because that's ultimately the end all be all question, isn't it? We got to know how much to budget, how much we're looking at spending, all that fun stuff.
This is the thing, is why most people say I've never been on a Disney cruise. This is usually the reason why. And fair. I will say, though, that when you're on a Disney cruise, it is such a heightened level of service and luxury. You understand why it's so expensive. It is, you feel like it is a luxury experience, even if you're not in a concierge level. It is absolutely a luxurious vacation. So it makes sense why it costs so much. Mm-hmm. But it's not affordable for a lot of people, and I get it. Yeah,
exactly. So we do want to just start off by mentioning that one of the biggest things that can affect your costs is the location on the boat that you end up and the size of the room that you end up in. So Kate, do you want to go into some more detail about what that means?
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of different categories for this. And we'll maybe get into some of the nitty-gritty details of this later. But for example, you can see this is one of the deck plans, and see all these different stripes. Those are all the different categories of rooms that you can book.
Right.
And there's a lot, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming if you've never done it before. So part of it is, I kind of divided it into several ones that are kind of like the general categories. There's inside, there's ocean view, which means you have a porthole. There's veranda, which means you have a balcony. There's the family veranda. It's a little bit bigger, a little more space. And then there's the suites, and then the concierge level, which is everything except for inside. So that covers there's concierge, ocean view, veranda, family view, so all those have a concierge level as well. So I would say let's start at the beginning with the one that I think we started with, it inside one when we first went, because that was the most budget friendly one, and that's what we could afford when we went. So these mean that you don't have a balcony, a window, any sort of access to the outside in your room. So however, there are ones on the Dream and Fantasy. They have virtual portholes, which is really cool.
Super cool.
So it's basically a live feed of what's outside of the boat, and every once in a while they have little magical characters that float by. They have 20 different ones. Yeah, so you'll see different. I think I saw Aladdin and Jasmine fly on a carpet when I was looking at the video of it.
Yeah.
So these ones are budget friendly. They are smaller in general. They're just smaller spaces, and they can also be a little bit harder for people who are claustrophobic. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like small enclosed spaces with no windows, don't book an inside room.
Nope. You're worried about claustrophobia, make a different selection when you choose your room.
Yeah. And then, but a compromise might be for those kinds of people that want to still save some money but still need to see the outside, is the ocean view rooms that have a porthole in them, because even though you can't open the window, you can't go outside, you can still see what's happening. We did this for our Alaska one because we couldn't afford a veranda on that occasion, but it was really nice to be able to see Alaska float by.
Yeah.
From our, and we had little kids too, so we didn't, they were napping and things, and so we couldn't, leave the room at that point, and so it was nice to still see outside.
Yeah.
And then the veranda, I think, is what most people tend to book, and I would recommend this as, if you can afford it, I recommend a veranda, because it's so much nicer to get away from the hustle and bustle of the boat and still be able to kind of watch the world go by. There are two different kinds of verandas usually on most of these boats. Again, some of the stuff changes depending on which ship you're on. But some verandas have like a solid white wall, like a metal wall, and some have a see-through plexiglass like railing. Like there's like bars, and then there's like a plexiglass so you can see through it. But plexiglass is better for if you have littles, because otherwise you're going to be lifting them up, or they're going to want to stand on stuff, which is not safe at all. So don't let them do that. But they won't be able to see out, which is such a bummer for little kids. So if you're going to do a veranda, make sure you don't have one that has a solid white wall for littles in particular. But these can also be a little bit cheaper too, the solid white ones, depending on which location you are in the boat. So the family veranda is just bigger and it sleeps more. So this one can sleep up to 5, I believe. So if you have a family of 5 and you don't want to get 2 rooms, this might be an option for you. I believe, though, it is concierge level, so it is a little more spendy. And then the suites are things that are like 1 bedroom plus. They're the ones that are huge and fancy, and you get lots and lots of space, and they look like these ones. So you get lots of options, and they're all concierge level. So you get all the benefits of the concierge, which is exclusive areas on the ship, like a private sun deck. You get internet, which is a big deal if you're on a ship. Complimentary food, drinks, and a large screen TVs available as well. So concierge level gets a lot of cool benefits from staying on that level as well.
Now, Kate said lots of space in those suites. Remember, you're still on a cruise boat. It's not really.
No, they're not. It's not huge.
It's not. It's more space than your standard stateroom, but you're still not looking at,
No,
thousands
I think
of square feet.
Let's see. So I feel like this was the Wish. So just to give you a little context here, the standard inside stateroom is 169 square feet, which is very small.
Yes. Very small.
A ocean view room with a porthole is 218 square feet. One with a veranda is 243 square feet. The one that is the family one is 284. So they're just kind of, it's like gives you 40 more square feet, right, with that one. And then the 1 bedroom is 608 square feet. And then if you go up from there, they have like the 1-story royal suites, which is 1,500 square feet. And if you're that person, you can be my friend and take me. That would be great. But and then there's a 2-story royal suite also that's 1,700 square feet. So if you are staying in the fanciest of fancies, it's like kind of a smaller sized house-ish.
Yeah, that's like more than my house.
It's a medium-sized house. There we go.
Well, and to put this into perspective, according to the Google, your standard room size at a value resort at Disney World is 260 square feet.
Okay, so that is the equivalent. That's a little bit bigger than the ocean view stateroom with a veranda. So, yeah, if you're used to a Disney World room, the veranda rooms will probably feel okay to you size-wise, but it is still very cramped. The nice part is, though, and we'll get more into these rooms and some hacks for them and whatnot in future episodes, but all of them feature something that's very unique, the Disney Cruise Line, and it's great for families, is they have a divided bathroom. So they have 2 sinks. They have one that's a shower room with a sink, and they have one that's like a toilet with a sink. And they have 2 different doors in 2 different separate areas, which is so nice when you have family and you're all trying to shower and get ready and do all the things.
Yep.
So that's in every room. They all have that. And then, of course, the concierge ones and the suites and stuff have more. But that is really nice, even for an inside suite, to have kind of that divided bathroom as well.
Yeah.
Other things for this, for if you're looking for what room to get, think about how much time you're going to spend in your room. If you're somebody who likes to be out at the pool, activities, the shows, the dinners, all the things, and you want to do it all, maybe you don't need a really big room. Maybe you don't need a big fancy room. Maybe you want to, save money there for other things, shore excursions or whatnot. If you're somebody where you're like, I'm an indoor cat and I like to stay in my room, then maybe getting a veranda is a better option for you because you'll want that quiet space to get away from everybody. And there is a lot of people on these boats. So just saying.
So true.
Yeah. My best advice is to look at the deck plans for the ship. Once you decide your itinerary, look at the ship and the deck plans. You can just Google the deck plans for the ship and kind of take a look around and see, what you're interested in. And then if you have a larger family, your options are a suite that has 5 to 8 people, or to book 2 rooms that are connecting. Now, this is something that you can see if you are looking at any of the deck plans. You'll see them listed. You can kind of see here. The ones that look like they have little doors between them, those are the ones that have doors between them.
Wow, that's so helpful.
I know. They look like little tiny arrow marks or something, slash marks. So make sure that when you book your room, you're also booking your suite at the same time. So it's not like make a request later like Disney World for a room. You are booking the one that you're going to sail in is what you're booking at the time of booking. So make sure you know which ones you're booking, especially if you're trying to get 2 together. And this is, again, sometimes where a travel agent might help you out to make sure that they're getting you the right space for your family. But something to note about the connecting rooms, they can be noisier if you're looking for a quiet space. So if you're traveling with a family and you're going to be noisy anyway, and it is what it is. But right. if you're maybe just trying to get away, just a couple or whatever, and you want it to be quieter, you will sometimes hear noise coming from that connecting door. If the family's not yours, if the family is yours, you'll probably still hear the noise, but they'll be able to come into your room. So
right. Yes, and Dalen made a really good point. Make sure if you don't want an adjoining room, be careful what you book, which is exactly what Kate just said. So really look at those tiny details on that layout when you go to book, because, again, unlike the resorts where you just book a standard room, no, you are literally booking the exact space that you're going to be in.
Yeah. And Ellie Beth says, morning coffee on the veranda with a book sounds amazing. And it is. It is everything. Watching the sunset on my veranda is one of my favorite parts of the cruise. And even if there's other activities, I always hope I can catch the sunset because that's my favorite. So, so now that we've talked kind of category of room, you have to decide the location of your stateroom, which we're already starting to talk about. So let's dive in. No pun intended. So this is chosen at the time of booking the location of the stateroom, like I mentioned. If your itinerary has Castaway Cay, just note that if you're on the starboard side, which is the right side, it faces the beach, the ocean, and the port side left staterooms face the bay, the post office, and the tram location. So I believe the starboard side is what they recommended if you have that itinerary, just a nicer view that day. Sometimes you'll be you won't be on the ship that day. You're going to be on the island anyway. So right. I don't think it's critical, but just something to note. And little ship terminology, if you can't remember, because you do kind of have to, learn a little bit of that. Starboard side versus port side. Port has 4 letters, and so does the word left. And that's how I always remember what is port and what is starboard. So just a little help. And some of the ships also have carpets in the hallways that will kind of, if the design on the carpet looks like it's upside down, that means you're headed towards the back of the ship. If it's right side up, you're headed towards the front.
I've seen that little hack, and I love that because I would be the person to get lost on the boat and be like, I have no idea where I am.
And once you get those hallways, you don't know what's going on because it all looks the same, and you're like, what end is up? I don't know. So if you're prone to motion sickness, you might want to book midship on a lower deck if possible, because it doesn't move around as much. So if you just kind of think of the logistics of a boat sitting in the water and it's going like this, you think of the things that are up at the top, they're going to go a little bit more than the things at the bottom, and same with the front and back as well. But midship is also the hub for all the activities on board a lot of the time, so it gets a little bit more traffic. It can be a little noisier, and then the elevators can also be busier midship, which is a pain when you're trying to get around. But except for the Wish, which has no midship elevators, they only have 2 bags of elevators. So I don't know why they decided to do that. I should do some research, but yeah, interesting change with the newer ships. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know.
So then forward and aft, in terms of like location for that, forward is of course towards the front of the boat and aft is the back of the boat. It's usually kind of quieter there, but it can be a longer walk to get back to your room from some of the activities depending on what you're going to. So in the end, you're going to end up probably going to one end of the boat or the other for any various activities. So don't let that totally sway you. Forward is easier access to the adult-only areas of the ship, typically, depending on what ship you're in. And then aft is easier access to the buffet restaurants, either Cabanas or the Marceline Market, which doesn't sound like a big deal. But if you have family, like my kids, like 2 of my kids are old enough to like go get their own food from the buffet and bring it back to the room. So they loved doing that. And so being on that area was really helpful for us. Although we were closer midship, but it was still nice to be able to have that option of grabbing food virtually anytime.
Yeah.
Whew, okay. It's a lot of information, I know, but it's all helpful. I hope
we did great.
Hopeful that it's helpful.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little about booking the trip now that you've decided where you might want to stay.
Yes. So let's talk about actually booking. Again, you can always book this through the website or you can contact a travel agent. But booking as early as possible will usually get you better rates for your itinerary that you're looking to go on. So do not wait till last minute. If you can at all avoid it, book it as soon as you are able to and as soon as you know that you're good to go. And paying attention to when they release the new season of cruises. Again, usually about a year and a half in advance. Like I said, currently we're in April of 2024. Dates are all the way out through September of 2025 right now. So
yeah, they just did like the summer of 2025, like within the last month.
Yes. So just keep in mind all of that as well. Also, we'll get you a better choice of staterooms when you book early. Like we said, you literally go in and physically pick your room. So if you want first dibs on that room, you've got to be ready to go as soon as that opens. That way you can get exactly where you want to be. And a good piece of advice is to follow the Disney Cruise Line for announcements. And again, working with a travel agent. But if you follow them on their social media, different locations, you'll be able to get those announcements right when they post them.
Yeah. And also, if you book with a travel agent, another benefit of that, and I'm going to be 100% transparent. I don't always book with a travel agent because I have a lot of anxiety about like having like control over my vacation.
I get that. I totally get that.
That doesn't mean that I don't love them and want to support them. So when I can, I try to. But it is nice that a lot of them will keep an eye on the changing prices. So if your cruise suddenly goes on sale or something, doesn't always happen, but if they tend to drop the price or something because they're trying to just sell, blocks of rooms, then they will alert you, and sometimes they'll save you money on your vacation that way, which is nice. And so you don't have to like keep watching it and seeing what's going on with the pricing for it, because who has time for that? And the other thing is that some travel agents will also offer an onboard credit if you book with them, so that you'll have money on the ship to put towards like shore excursions and, your room, drinks and things like that you spend, souvenirs and stuff you spend on board. So that is also a really nice thing to have as well.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for really finding, if you are wanting to book with a travel agent, really finding someone that you feel totally comfortable with to help ease that anxiety. Because I know, like you guys all know, I know what I'm doing when it comes to booking for Disney World. But oftentimes I will still book through a travel agent, but it's someone that I trust, and it's someone that I tell them like, hey, I really just need you to book this, and then I'm going to do everything else. And they're like, okay, that's cool, because I want to support their small business and let them get, that credit rather than just letting Disney keep it. But in this instance, there is something to be said, especially if you're a newbie when it comes to Disney Cruise Lines, finding a travel agent that really can help you, that you feel comfortable with. And if you connect with someone and you don't feel super comfortable with them, that's okay. Look for someone else that you feel comfortable with to help ease that trip anxiety that I think we all get when it comes to booking and planning and figuring it all out.
Yeah, I think any direction you go is the right one, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So, but there are benefits for sure in booking with a travel agent in this instance for Disney Cruise Line. I'll say that. Yes. All that being said, something that you should know about if you are a newbie to Disney Cruise Line cruising is the Castaway Members Club, which is basically like their frequent cruising program. So, so Castaway members get the first pick of rooms when they release new blocks of rooms. So you won't get, even if you're like right on the ball first day, you can't really be first day unless you're a Castaway member. And then it does go based on the level of Castaway members. So they have silver is the lowest. So you complete one cruise, you're in the club, you're a silver member. Gold is after completing 5 cruises. Platinum is 10 cruises. And then pearl is 25 cruises. Life goals. But you must cruise once every 5 years to hold your membership, which is a newer rule. They didn't used to have that. So now you have to continue to cruise. So I told my husband, I'm sorry, now we have to go once every 5 years because Disney makes me or I lose my thing. So
yeah, you have to. It's now a requirement. I see nothing wrong with that.
So sometimes they'll get little benefits for that. I did get, we went on the 25th anniversary sailing this last time and we got a special Mickey art print that was only for Castaway members that was delivered to our room one night, which was really fun. You also get kind of like an onboard gift. Like we got lanyards this last time and they were based on the color for your thing. So we got little silver ones. So it's fun to get those little things as a Castaway member. But yeah, they get first pick for all the rooms. So
and is that a free membership? You don't have to pay any fees other than going on the cruise. Yes, obviously.
Free, but... yes. Yeah, just going on the cruise is all gets you in the club. And then, so on your next cruise, you'll like be in the club. You kind of like, you have to complete a whole cruise and then you're in the Castaway Club for your next cruise, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's Castaway Club. Should we talk about the actual cost?
Yes. Okay. So
brace yourself, kids.
Here is the best breakdown that we could kind of give. Because again, all of these prices vary based on where you're going, when you're going, how long you're going, all of those things. The prices that we're going to give here are for a kind of standard family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. So you can kind of anticipate if yours will be lower or higher depending on your travel party. Like we talked about earlier, you have to kind of gauge your location, then that will then also help you get your cost kind of figured out based on where you end up wanting to be on the boat. So for your 2 and 3 night option, they start at $3,100. So that can give you kind of an idea. And again, these are prices for 2 adults and 2 children. Yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of what the price includes and doesn't include here briefly in a moment. Your 4-night cruise prices range from $2,580 to $5,933. Again, you'll see that huge difference even just on the 4-night cruise because it really just depends on where you're going and all of that. 5 and 6 night prices range from $3,170 to $8,500. So again, it's a big spread. The 7-night price ranges is from like $3,708 all the way up to $11,480. Those longer cruises, you get those higher numbers.
Keep breathing, kids, because the big one's coming.
And I don't love the way that they broke this down on the website, but this was the best that I could get for you guys. So the next category they give is an 8 through 13 night range. So that's a pretty wide spread, but those prices will start at $5,500 and they will go all the way up to $17,500 for those. So yeah. And then your final cost point for your 14-night options, prices range anywhere from $7,877 to $8,162, which is interesting because it's not as high as
I think it's the repositioning cruise, probably.
Yep.
Like yes. Those are ones that don't have as many port calls.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And that is a huge variation on the cost because if you have the majority of your cruise are at sea days, you don't have those added extra port costs and things like that are just factored into your general cost. So a massive spread on pricing. So it's really hard to kind of ballpark without knowing where and when and all of those types of things.
And it also, and what room you book definitely comes into the equation, because if you're staying in those suites or those like upper level, the concierge, they're way more than that inside stateroom, so that depends. And the size of your family is going to determine that too. Do you need 2 rooms? Do you need like a family suite? All those kinds of things.
Right. And again, this is like 1 room, 4 people. So like Kate mentioned, if you're traveling with extended family, you've got a family of 5 or 6, that is going to drastically change your cost breakdown for your cruise.
For sure. And so the other things you need to calculate, because this is not the final cost of your cruise. I wish it was. I wish this is it. It is fairly all inclusive in that it includes a lot of things, like includes all of your food, includes all of your entertainment, it includes, all the things on the ship that you need. But it does not include shore excursions, which can be spendy in themselves. And we're going to do an entire episode on shore excursions and kids clubs and stuff. So that's coming up. So we won't get into that too much here, but depending on how many of those you do, that can also add up. And also the cost of gratuity, which a lot of people forget is mandatory.
Yeah.
Because if you don't prepay it, they will automatically just tack it onto your bill. And so the cost of gratuity recommended is $14.50 per person per day, or concierge is $15.50. So if you're on the higher level, you pay a little bit more. And this goes to your dining room server, your dining room assistant server, your dining room head server, and your stateroom host. And honestly, of like those, you really do want to tip them by the end of the week because they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Like the stateroom host kind of like looks after all the little things that you need for your family, and they make the little towel animals and things in your room. They do your turn down service every night. They do a whole bunch of stuff. And your servers are fantastic in learning what your family likes, and they will, especially if you have kids, like they will bring my kids what they want, like what they like without even like them asking. They just remember, and they're so great. But yeah, you will be charged this if you don't prepay it. It's not optional. So make sure you budget that into the cost of your room. Yes. And and also alcoholic drinks and specialty dining is also extra. So if you want to have alcoholic drinks on board, or if you want to dine at like Paolo or any of the specialty restaurants, that's all going to be extra as well. And also the nursery, if you want to have littles, I think it's under 3.
That sounds right.
Additional cost as well.
Yeah, and something else to consider as well as you're looking at kind of overall trip cost. None of that includes the cost to travel to port, the lodging the night before or after.
Airfare. Yes.
Airfare, all those types of things. So keep that in mind as well, because unless you're local to the port, you're going to have to pay to get there, pay to stay the night before, and possibly the night after, depending on timing of your itineraries and things like that. So that's another additional cost to consider.
Yeah. So it's never just like, this is the cost of the cruise, although the cruise cost does contain an awful lot of things in it, and it does pay for a lot of things, but it's not everything. So when you book, you are required to put a 20% deposit to book. Sometimes they have like a 50% off deal where you only need to pay 10% for a deposit. So it's kind of fun if you can catch those. But typically it is 20%. And then they have different categories with restrictions. You do have to pay in full at time of purchase. That depends on those. And it's kind of like only specific ones you have to do that. Mm-hmm. It's also, if it's past your paid in full date, like your cruise is getting really close, so you're kind of going last minute, you will have to pay 100% at the time of booking. So keep that in mind. So then the cancellation fees, there's your final payment is usually, it depends on how many nights you're going. If it's suites and concierge, your final payment due date is 150 days out. If your cruise is 6 nights or more, your final payment date is 120. And cruises 1 to 5 nights is 90 days out from your cruise. So you can get your deposit back if it's, you get 100% of the vacation price. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at this wrong. Whoop.
Try again.
The cancellation fees, you can get, you kind of lose your deposit if it's certain amount out. So keep that in mind. The deposit is non-refundable in the suites and non-concierge stateroom. So if those really expensive ones, if you cancel, you're just losing your deposit. Mm-hmm. But it is the cancellation fees start to kind of like as you get closer to your trip. I will go through them all, but you start to lose greater percentages, usually by 25% increments the closer you get to your trip. And then you kind of just lose everything if you cancel last minute. So something to keep in mind for that.
Yeah, I think that's major because we're used to, if you're used to doing the Disney parks, their cancellation policy is completely different than that. So that is something really to make sure you're paying attention to, is if something happens, you have to cancel and rebook even, you want to make sure that you're looking at all of that information.
Yeah. I have a question here from Steve. It says, so the total could be more than $12,000 for 6 people. Yes, if it depends on your itinerary. So it's a very hard question to ask or answer, rather. It's a really hard question for us to answer just because we don't know. Depends on how long your cruise is and if you're going to do a suite versus 2 rooms and then what category of rooms you're going to book. Right. But yes, it could be that much depending on your itinerary and what your situation is. So, but it could also be less if you're going on a shorter cruise. So, keep that in mind.
Yeah. And it's so hard to predict. You hear us talk about ballpark prices for stuff in the parks. It's much easier to kind of predict that because you have big groups of rooms that are all the same rate, things like that. But it is so truly dependent on these individual details about your wants for your cruise. And it is fairly easy to go through that process to get kind of a generalized quote on the website if you just click through some different options. But you have to really know you have to know going into it where you want to go, how long you want to go, and where on the boat you want to be. So, and what type of room you want. So if you can answer those and you know that information, just go plug it into the website and see
like
what
instant quote. Yeah, it's really, really easy to see the prices, and they break it down also per person in your stateroom as well for how much it costs. So that's what I would recommend too, is going, if you just kind of want to know in general how much this costs and you're not really sure if you want to book or anything, that's a great place to go. Is Disney Cruise Line, low pressure. It's just, you can get an instant quote and just kind of figure out, oh, it costs this much, and like, oh, okay, we have to save up for that. Or, or like, oh yeah, maybe we could book this. And then you can kind of go further into the process of booking it from there.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about, just kind of a reminder here, in case we missed any of this stuff previously, what you need to be able to book, which is literally what we just talked about.
You got all the information now, right? Like, what itinerary, what ship, what stateroom, what dates you're going, like location on the ship, like all the things, and you won't just have a general area for what stateroom you want to be in, because some of the the exact stateroom you want might not be available when you go to book. So have some options for where you might want to stay.
Yes. So you got to start with that itinerary, right? The itinerary you want to reserve is what you need to make sure you have first. Again, number of adults and children under 18 who will be in each stateroom if you've got multiples or just one. Birth dates, addresses, and phone numbers for each guest in your travel party, which is pretty standard when you're booking almost any vacation. And then payment information. So you can pay by credit card, Disney gift card, or the Disney Rewards Redemption gift cards as well.
Yeah. And at some point you might, I'm trying to remember at what point in my vacation that we had to submit our passport information if you're going on an international itinerary, because they will require that for you to just get on the ship. Like, they're going to need your passport information. Right. And also your Castaway Club ID number, if applicable. If you've cruised before, don't forget to plug that in so you're getting everything that you should get. So
yes. Let's talk now about, okay, so you have figured all of that out, but now comes the question of travel insurance. Kate, what has your experience been with travel insurance with your cruises?
So it's interesting because we have used travel insurance in the past, and we actually have used the insurance. My husband we did this while we lived overseas because we couldn't get any insurance in the EU, like medical insurance. So we used travel insurance for the year that we lived there. And we went to Amsterdam, and he got like a really bad ear infection or something and had to end up in the ER. And like, we were like broke college students at this point, and we had no money. And so when the bill came from that, because like the EU covers anybody that lives there, but doesn't cover foreign
Right.
people.
Right.
So when we got the bill for it, we were like, it was not that bad. In like hindsight, it was like
Right.
$500, but like $500 to like broke college students were like, how are we going to survive? But the good news is because we had purchased that insurance, like it paid that. We submitted that bill to them and they paid it. So we didn't have to pay it. It's even more critical, I think, when you have these really, really expensive vacations where there's a lot of things that could go wrong.
Right.
Everything from your luggage getting lost to a delayed flight that makes you miss your cruise where you have to like get on a different port. Hopefully, God forbid that should ever happen to any of you. But it does happen. Things that like if you need a medical evac from the ship to wherever, if something happens to you, all of that is extremely expensive. And also there's weather related things like hurricanes and stuff. And some of these travel insurance plans do cover that. But you have to be really careful and read very carefully what it covers and what it doesn't.
Yes.
And so sometimes your credit card that you book with will cover certain travel expenses up to a certain degree. So you can also look for that if you're booking with a credit card that maybe I've heard, Chase covers a whole bunch and Visa does and stuff. But I use a broker when I buy travel insurance for these big trips that we go on. I have a lot of people, a lot of logistics. And that I do insuremytrip.com, but there's a couple other places you can use as well for that. And that allows you to compare plans from a whole bunch of different places versus just going to one and like hoping they have what you need.
Yeah,
and
then that's super helpful.
So you can actually compare like what they cover and what they don't. There's a whole bunch of people that did cover, panini things that happened with the world, like the things that happened with the world, and some places would cover, that kind of illness and some places wouldn't. So, it's all something you really want to pay attention to what coverage that you might think you need and then get that. And it's actually fairly affordable if you're paying for a cruise, let's say that costs $12,000 per person, paying like $600 to cover it is worth it in my opinion.
Yeah.
So because if you look at this, like if you can't go last minute because some medical emergency or something, you lose all of that money, which is such a bummer. So
yeah, especially with that kind of tiered refund, so to speak, that the Disney Cruise Lines have that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. If it's last minute, you're looking at, sorry, you're out of luck. So you definitely want to consider that when booking something like this.
Yeah, there is. I mean, if you're used to booking in the Disney parks, a lot of the times if something happens, they will work with you because they can usually fill that room somewhat last minute if they need to. That's not the situation here. Like you're just kind of out of luck. And so you have to protect yourself to make sure, protect your investment in your vacation to make sure that you don't lose everything that you put into it just for some unforeseen circumstance. And stuff does happen. Life happens sometimes. So that's my best advice is to do that. And again, if you're traveling in that area that has hurricanes, make sure your coverage covers hurricanes because that, they could just cancel your cruise too. So, Right.
And I mean that the areas around Florida and down into the Caribbean, they have a fairly lengthy hurricane season. So
yes,
it's like basically March all the way through September.
6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you have that coverage so that way your investment in your fun is safe from those silly hurricanes.
Yeah. And you really don't know what's going to happen to, and like there's also restrictions for, if you're pregnant past a certain number of weeks, you can't go. And, usually you kind of have some advance notice on how many weeks it's going to be out for you. But, there's also certain scenarios that pop up. What if you get put on bed rest or something if you're pregnant and early in your pregnancy or something like, just stuff that happens. Right. So when you book your cruise, I also just kind of go right after and I book my trip insurance and I just like have it done. And there is an insurance you can do through Disney Cruise Line. I usually prefer to do one outside of it. So it covers everything in my trip, like my flight and travel to and from and all that stuff. That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. And Kim mentioned over here also when you're at a port or another country or something happens, you want to have that coverage like Kate was mentioning when they were over in Europe. So having that extra coverage when you're not on the boat or if you're at port in a different country or a different area, that's super helpful to have too.
Yeah. And if something happens to your luggage and you have to buy an entirely new wardrobe, for your trip, because that does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good to note. I do have a question here. Single Dad is wondering, I saw a couple missed their boat and they had to find a way home. Would the insurance cover that? It really just depends on what your coverage is through your insurance. So that's why Kate was mentioning, really look at those details and see what all it covers and try to think about, okay, what are these crazy scenarios that could happen and would I be covered in that situation?
It really depends on the insurance that you get. That probably would be classified under like, flight changes or something like that, like if they had already scheduled a flight from somewhere. But that's a really tricky situation, because then your stuff's all on that boat too, and you have to go get it. So that's a bummer. Do not miss your cruise ship. Don't be a pier runner. Those are those people that come in at the last second trying to make sure they make the boat. I
love that there's a name for them.
Oh, yeah. You can watch it online. They have the TikToks of the pier runners.
Oh, my God.
People will watch them. It's
something I never knew was on the internet.
Yeah, no, you can there's people that make they get a drink and they sit on their veranda and they watch the people that come in late and watch them run down the pier. I don't do that, but I think it's funny that people do. So
are you sure you don't do that, Kate? Because I feel like
TikTok sometimes, not gonna lie. But I feel bad for them because
right.
There's so many things that can happen while you're out.
Right.
About.
You never know why or what happened, or did they just lose track of time, or did something terrible happen to them? So
yeah, you never know.
Right.
So
right.
I feel bad for them. But some people just are really not great at watching the clock and miscalculate, and then that boat's leaving with or without you. So be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's one of those
that.
times. Yeah, that's one of those times where you set 4 alarms way earlier than you think you need to make sure that you are where you need to be when you need to be.
Right. How we talk about leave yourself an hour and a half in Disney World to get anywhere in Disney World, even though it's probably not going to take you that. Do it anyway if it's important to be there.
Yep.
That's the same kind of scenario here. And we'll definitely talk more about shore excursions. And I think that's what's next. Are we doing 101 next?
Yes. So that kind of wraps up our initial entry into the Disney Cruise Line and how to book and where you can go and that type of thing. So part 2 will be next, which we are doing. Kate has aptly named it Disney Cruise Line 101. So we are going to talk about the basics of the boats and dining and going ashore process and debarkment process and all of the above with that. So kind of a little bit of a rundown of a little taste of everything that you might experience when you're
kind of we'll go on a virtual cruise. So next time, bring your fun drink and we'll go on a virtual cruise together. From the entire process, from getting on the boat to getting off the boat and all the kind of little things you just need to know. And I think after that, we're going to cover kids clubs and activities, shore excursions, those kinds of things. And then on part 4 will probably be a lot of just Disney Cruise Line hacks and tips and whatnot. So if you guys have any specific, hacks, tips, things that you want people to look out for as they're booking their Disney cruise, please send it in either on our Discord for Mom Street USA, or also you can email us at momstreetusa@gmail.com. or on any of our social media platforms, just message us and let us know, because we would love to include your comments and tips into the show as well.
Yes, and all of that information can be found in Mr. Lincoln bio up that direction if you're watching us currently on TikTok, or you can always find it on our social media. But before we completely wrap for this podcast episode, we have to do our Ask the Moms. Are we ready to see our question for today?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so every podcast episode, we end with our Ask the Mom segment, where we take a question from our Mom Street community and do our best to give a short and sweet answer to help you guys out. So the question for this episode is, I am a Walt Disney World regular going to Disneyland for the first time. What are the main differences I should be aware of? And that is a loaded question, but we'll see if we can give a couple brief things that maybe they should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, it's tricky. I would say, you can take a deep breath and relax because Disneyland is so much less stressful than Disney World. It's much more likely that you'll get to see everything that you want to see or close to it, depending on how long you're there, of course. And it's not as much walking, and it's a lot more shade, a lot more places to sit. But I will say that one of the major things you should know about is Magic Bands is a huge difference. You can use Magic Band Plus, so the ones that light up. Those will work at Disneyland. Not everybody uses them, though. A lot of people just use their phones and the app, and they scan their phone if they're using the Lightning Lane system. You can also just use your ticket on your phone to get into the parks at the turnstiles rather than tap styles. It's a difference as well. And I would just say that Genie Plus is 100% worth it at Disneyland because you can easily park hop to California Adventure and you can use it for both parks. You don't have to buy them individually per park. So I highly, highly recommend that unless it's an extraordinarily slow day, because you can accomplish so much with those Genie Plus packages. And it also covers your photos as well. So then you can use the PhotoPass photographers and get that. But the biggest thing is that make sure where you stay, because you might not be inside the Disney bubble. That's one of the biggest things I say people going to Disneyland. You don't have to stay in the Disney hotel like we recommend for Disney World, because they are very, very expensive. So by all means, if you want to stay there and you have the means to do it, do stay there. The Grand California would be my recommendation for that because it's the closest to the parks. Or the Disneyland Hotel if you want to take the monorail, but it's finicky sometimes, and it only goes inside Disneyland in Tomorrowland, so it's not like a great transportation method. But I would say watch where you stay. Make sure, I usually recommend people stay off on Harbor Boulevard and closer to the entrance to between the parks into the plaza, the better, because you just have less walking. Some of those hotels, the further out you get, it's a little bit sketchier because it is just Anaheim. Right. It's not in the Disney bubble. So be careful of that. And the other thing is just really take time to appreciate the tiny, small little details of Disneyland. It is charming in every sense of the word. And it has beautiful, gorgeous, tiny little details and history that you will want to slow down and stop and examine and appreciate. And that is one of the biggest differences from Disney World. Not that it doesn't have its own wonderful magical qualities, but it's different in that way. We just kind of want to take it all in.
And a lot closer together. Kate mentioned less walking, but you'll find that the attractions are a lot closer together.
Concentrated.
Quicker. Yeah, it's a lot quicker walking from one end to the other just because everything is kind of crammed into that small space. But that's one of the nice things about Disneyland for sure.
Yeah, there's way more attractions, like number of attractions in Disneyland versus Magic Kingdom. So hopefully they're improving that and they're adding some to Magic Kingdom soon. But there's just way more to do there than you would expect. I think there's 29 attractions in Disneyland alone.
Crazy.
So it's a ton of things to do. You won't run out of stuff to do. Promise that. And I see a comment also is so magical with character interaction. So if you want to just see random characters walking through, hang out in Fantasyland around 10 to 11 and you'll see just dozens, all kinds of them, and they'll get on the carousel with people, and it's magical. It's really fun.
So fun. And I will mention that we do have it on our list. It had been requested of us to do a full episode on doing Disneyland as a worlder, was kind of the suggestion. So that is something that we will be covering here. We did just start our cruise line episode, so it's going to be a little bit before we get to it, but circle back. Hopefully we can give you some more information before you go. If not, then, hopefully we can help someone else out.
Yeah. And then eventually we'll get Jackie to Disneyland, which will be great.
Someday. It will happen. It will happen. But yes, so after our cruise line episode, we've got 3 or 4 topics kind of already planned for after that. And that is one of those for that kind of time frame. I think looking like midsummer probably, when we'll be touching on those, some of those topics like that you guys have suggested for us.
Yes. Yeah, because there's many, many more things to look out for in Disneyland versus Disney World, and there's no way I could cover them all in this amount of time, right. But we'll definitely go over them in that episode.
Yes. And as always, if you've got a question that you need help finding the answer to or want to submit for our Ask the Mom segment, please send it our way. You can find us on our good friend Kirk at Walrus Carp on his Discord. We have a whole Mom Street area on there. You can email us at momstreetusa@gmail.com, or you can always send us a message on any of our social media accounts. We are on TikTok, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on YouTube. So if you also, yes, we are everywhere. So also, if you haven't found us on those other platforms, we would love for you guys to give us a follow and a share over there to help us spread our information out for anyone else who may need it. We love growing our Mom Street community, and we're so grateful for all of you who are already here with us and would love to expand that number to help more people.
Yes. Yes. And also, if you go to DisneyCicerone.com/MomStreetUSA, you can find all of our previous resources listed, including a vacation checklist and water maps for the parks, and all those kinds of things are listed there. And also a sign up for our newsletter, which is once a month. And there is exclusive content in that, not only information about what's coming up in the parks, but also a little note from us as well.
Yes. And I think with that,
we ready to wrap up?
We've covered it all.
Okay.
For now.
For now.
Not really.
Next time.
Not really all of it, but we've covered what we set out to cover, and I think we're good to sign off.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode of Mom Street USA. We hope that you learned a little something about Disney Cruise Line, but there is so much more information to come that we will cover next time. But until then, Jackie, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
No, I'm excited to go on a little virtual excursion on our cruise next week and kind of figure out how it works from beginning to end. So we hope you'll join us for that.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. We appreciate you guys so much for being part of our Mom Street community. Until next time, we'll see you from Mom Street USA.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.